What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 1. Yes sir, the NFL is back every Tuesday for the whole season after Monday Night Football. That following day I'm going to be having these weekly NFL recap videos. And starting off with Week 1, I mean there were a lot of good games. There were some stinkers as well for sure. Carolina Panthers, New York Giants, I'm definitely talking about y'all. But talking about the good games right now, the Ravens and the Chiefs, that was a wild ending, almost went to overtime. Even the game on Friday night between the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles, that was really good as well. The game between the Lions and the Rams went to overtime and the Lions ended up winning. So we're going to talk about every game in depth fully. Some of the biggest takeaways, because there was a lot of players that didn't play great. I talked about the Giants and Panthers, obviously Daniel Jones, obviously Bryce Young, and even with the Browns, Deshaun Watson, he got obliterated by the Cowboys defense. So that's a lot to talk about there. But before we individually get into every single game, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know we post about here videos about the NBA, NFL, sports, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, shorts, reels, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 1. So of course we have to draw back to the Thursday night game, which really kicked it all off. That game between the Ravens and Chiefs, a wild ending for sure. Isaiah likely had that reception, but his foot was out of bounds. It was a good read. Obviously, a lot of people talk about how Lamar Jackson had missed Zay Flowers on that wide open touchdown a couple plays before, because we all know that after likely it looked like he got in, they were going to go for 2. So that would have been a crazy finish. Imagine if they had the touchdown and went for 2 and won the game. That would have been crazy. It would have been a second year in a row that the Chiefs lost their home opener, but that wouldn't have meant nothing, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, because they still won last year when it mattered most. But another thing to take away from this game really is that the Chiefs, they're going to be super explosive, way better than they were last year. All the drops, things of that nature, that should be out of the fray. Xavier Worthy went crazy, had 2 touchdowns, really looked explosive. Obviously has the fastest 40 time in NFL combine history, did that this past year. And Hollywood Brown didn't even play in this game. Rasheed Rice looked great. I mean, just a lot to talk about there, guys. I mean, the Chiefs, they are really picking up where they left off, and honestly they can be way better than they were last year. And it's crazy to say that because they won the Super Bowl last year and in 2022. So this year, I mean, they're not going anywhere. The AFC, it's looking stiff for y'all for sure. But talking about the Ravens a little bit more, I mean, Lamar Jackson, he had an amazing game. He almost had 400 all-purpose yards, threw for 273 passing yards, had a touchdown, also had 16 carries for 122 rushing yards. I mean, that's insane. You know what he can do at the backfield. And Derrick Henry, he didn't have the greatest game. Really, that Chiefs defense, they were in the backfield almost every play, stopping the run. Did that pretty good, but when Lamar Jackson was able to do his RPOs and get out the pocket, he was able to manipulate their defense. But it was different when Derrick Henry was getting the ball. That was a really good game. I mean, it came down to at the end, obviously. I really don't think that we could ask for more. I think the Ravens, they're going to be nice still. They still have a great unit on both sides. You still have a great defense, Raquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and different pieces like that. So it's going to be intriguing to see where these two teams shape up going into the season. But obviously, they're 2 of the biggest contenders in the AFC. I would say so for sure. But the Chiefs look great. The Ravens look great. And I think when we get to the end of the season, looking back at this game and looking forward to the playoffs, it'll be intriguing to see where these teams will be at that time. I honestly don't have to say too much about Patrick Mahomes' performance, because we recognize how universally great he is. The best quarterback in the league by a mile. Already you can make the argument that he's a top 2 quarterback of all time and really climbing up for Brady's status. So his game, I mean, he had 291 passing yards, had a touchdown and an interception, but you know what he does, how he manipulated the Ravens defense in the pocket, extending plays and things of that nature. No one's surprised by that. And like I said, this offense having Xavier Worthy now, Rasheed Rice, of course we have that stuff off the field that's still pending and things of that nature, but also the return of Hollywood Brown. This team is going to be even better than last year, and you can make the case even better in 2022 as well. The next game that took place was that Green Bay game against the Philadelphia Eagles, where the Eagles did win 34-29. A really entertaining matchup. I got to watch the game afterwards. I couldn't watch it live. But what I took away from that is that these teams are really closer to being evenly matched than we thought. Obviously, Jordan Love got hurt, dodged a serious injury, and from Adam Schefter's reports, it seems like he'll only be out around 3 to 4 weeks, so that's a blessing for Green Bay Packers fans. Right now, you have a little conundrum because you'll have Malik Willis starting, and who knows what that'll look like, but the team is good overall, so hopefully they can try to split the games in the time that Jordan Love misses. But talking about the Eagles first, because I really want to talk about them, Saquon freaking Barkley. 24 carries, 109 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and also a receiving touchdown too, so 3 touchdowns in total. Hey, he went crazy. He's really going to have like a Christian McCaffrey type of impact on his offense in Philadelphia. I believe so, at least as long as he stays healthy. But they look great. AJ Brown also looked amazing, which was really surprised. He's a top 5 to 10 receiver in the league. Had 5 receptions for 119 receiving yards and a long touchdown from Jalen Hurts. So that was great. Devontae Smith also had 7 receptions for 84 receiving yards. We know the type of threat that he is as well too. So they looked good. I would say a couple of issues from the Eagles were just some of the exchanges and the turnovers. Obviously, Jalen Hurts threw 2 interceptions. Him and Cam Jurgens had some early miscommunications on the snaps and things of that nature, but they were able to clean things up and ultimately win the game. So that's the most important thing. On the flip side with the Green Bay Packers, like I said, they looked good as well. They did lose the game, but someone had to lose obviously. But they had a lot of good components and good signs too. Jaden Reed went freaking off. He had 4 receptions for 138 receiving yards. He had a touchdown receiving and a touchdown rushing. He looked really good. Josh Jacobs didn't have the greatest game. He had some receiving yards and around 80 rushing yards. I needed him to play better because I have him in fantasy, but that's besides the point. And also Christian Watson had a touchdown. So, I mean, the biggest thing to take away from this game is that these teams are going to be in the thick of it in terms of this season, potentially the postseason as well too. We just have to see how the Green Bay Packers are able to ride the wave without Jordan Love for the next few games. But we're seeing that Jordan Love, I mean, he played really good. He had 260 passing yards, had a touchdown, interception. But Jordan Love, we're seeing that he is a really talented quarterback. He had 260 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. That young team in Wisconsin, they're playing pretty good, but in Philadelphia, they're making a case trying to really redeem themselves from last season, especially the fall off that they had at the end of the season, trying to get back to that success that they had in 2022, reaching the Super Bowl, and this time potentially making it. So both of these teams, they look really good. Could be a potential NFC Championship preview game. Only time will tell, but I do believe that was a really good game between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Speaking of those stinker games I talked about earlier, we're about to run through those real quick because we don't need to talk about the Panthers and Giants for that long. So obviously, the Saints mollywopped the Carolina Panthers, winning 47-10. Really, that game was over by the second quarter. Bryce Young threw an interception on his first play, actually, I should say. I mean, that's crazy. I hate to say negative things about players, but that whole situation in Carolina is just cooked already, in my opinion, from last season. I mean, Dave Canales, he had a lot of good play calling for Baker Mayfield in the year prior with Geno Smith, but Carolina seems like something that is a definition of purgatory right now. I mean, I hope they can get things better for Bryce Young, but it's not looking good right now in his second season. Right now, I think he's 2-15 as a starter so far, and last year that really just ended things, and he's in his third new offense already in his second year. That's not good, man. You have to have structure around the quarterback, so that sucks for the Panthers, but for the Saints, they look really good. They always have a great defense. They picked off Bryce Young 2 times. Derek Carr had a really good game, 200 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara had a really good game, had 110 yards total, 83 rushing, 27 receiving, and he had a touchdown as well too. So that Saints team, they're a really big question mark in my opinion, because that NFC South, obviously, and we'll talk about the Buccaneers and the Falcons later, but they look good in this game. I mean, a lot of people are going to look really good against the Panthers though, so that's a good point there. But yeah, the Panthers, y'all might already be cooked, and this is just week 1. Now let's talk about that game against the Giants real quick. Oh my gosh, Daniel freaking Jones. I mean, we kind of saw this in the preseason with that pick 6 against the Texans. Threw a pick 6 in this game, had 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, only had 186 passing yards as the Giants lost to the Vikings 28-6. That game was bad, man. It's a bad time for the Giants. It really is. And then you just saw Saquon play crazy with your division rival a couple days before, and you have to play against Saquon and the Eagles 2 times this year. It's about to be bad in New York. Obviously, a lot of people thought they should have drafted a quarterback in this 2024 draft. Well, they're definitely drafting one in 2025. There's no question about it. I do not see Daniel Jones being a part of this team. You chose Daniel Jones essentially over Saquon when you gave him that contract in 2023. So it sucks if you're a Giants fan. I'm so sorry, but yeah, you're in purgatory as well, just like Carolina. For the Vikings, they look really good. Obviously, JJ McCarthy out for the year with that knee injury, but Sam Darnold looked pretty good. I mean, he had an efficient game. He had an interception, but he threw for 2 touchdowns, completed 19 out of his 24 passing attempts, and also had 208 yards. Even Aaron Jones, who came over from the Green Bay Packers to be on the Vikings now, he had a really good game. He had 94 rushing yards and a touchdown. Then also Justin Jefferson, he had a touchdown, 59 receiving yards. Not too crazy, but he didn't need to go crazy because, frankly, you played against the Giants. So yeah, really, that was kind of a get-back game from the 2022 playoff matchup, but yeah, it doesn't matter now. This is a good one for the Vikings. We'll see how things shape up for them in the NFC North. I can tell you potentially how things will shape up for the Giants, because they might end up last in not only the NFC East, but in the league in general. This next Sunday afternoon game, in my opinion, was the biggest upset of the day, obviously. The freaking Bengals losing to the Patriots 16-10. Shout out to Gerard Mayo getting his first win as a head coach. That defense looked really good in New England, but man, if you're a Bengals fan, what happened? Freaking Joe Burrow. First and foremost, he's my fantasy quarterback. I started him on Sunday. He only gave me 8 freaking points, and he was projected to have 19. That's really why I lost. But anyways, I'm not gonna talk about fantasy wise, but bro, that's a stinker game. And for the Bengals, I mean, yeah, they usually always start off slow and end up getting things right, but you don't want to start off slow. I mean, that's bad. Last year, obviously, they didn't make the playoffs, so I'm not talking about last year, but even like in 2022, they started off slow, made the AFC Championship game, but still, bro, like, that's not a good way to start. You have all the tension between the Jamar Chase situation. Of course, he played the game, and he hasn't got his contract yet. He had 6 receptions for 62 receiving yards. I mean, not too crazy. T. Higgins also didn't play in that game, So that would have been another weapon that Joe Burrow would have had in that game on Sunday. But I mean, that's not the excuse though. People projected the Bengals to win by a wide margin in this game, and they laid an egg for sure. I don't know if it's because Brian Callahan is the new head coach in Tennessee now, and he's not the offensive coordinator anymore for the Bengals. I don't know, but that did not look good for Cincinnati at all. But shout out to the Patriots. They played a pretty good game. Ramondre Stevenson for the Patriots had a really good game, had 120 rushing yards and a touchdown. Jacoby Brissett, he played a pretty conservative game, did enough not to mess up or turn over the ball, so that's a really good sign for the Patriots, because eventually they'll end up starting Drake May. Maybe not this season, maybe at the end of this season, but you know that's their franchise quarterback of the future. But played a pretty good game, so shout out to the Patriots winning the game. But for the Bengals, man, y'all gotta stop starting out slow, because that's not a good sign at all. But it's a bad game, and I think they'll turn things around. So you can give another unconventional game. The Pittsburgh Steelers beat Atlanta Falcons 18-10 on Sunday, and the Steelers, all their points were from field goals. But I will say that Justin Fields, he played a pretty good solid game. Of course, Russell Wilson not playing, still dealing with that calf injury that he was dealing with in training camp, and play against the Broncos next week. We already know that Russell is going to be itching to play against his former team, especially Sean Payton, to prove him wrong. I don't know. I mean, they won this game with Justin Fields. I know they didn't score any touchdowns. Fields had 156 passing yards and 57 rushing yards, so that was a good sign for them. So I don't know. Do you keep riding the wave? I think so. I mean, unless Justin Fields just lays an egg against the Broncos, or at some point they need to feel like they need to put Russell in, but you don't really want to mess up a rhythm like that, especially off of a good win. George Pickens had 6 receptions for 85 yards. He looked good. Najee Harris had a pretty solid game as well too. That defense was absolutely ballistic and nuclear, neutralizing the freak out of Kirk Cousins. I mean, it seems like he's still not fully all the way there, recovered from that Achilles injury. And of course, who would be? I believe he's 36 years old now, so I mean, still working back from that. But if you're a Falcons fan, if Kirk Cousins keeps playing like this, do y'all want Michael Penix to come in? Because I mean, y'all did draft him top 10, but y'all gave all that bread to Kirk Cousins, so I mean, it's a slippery slope right there, I would say, in Atlanta. I think they definitely still have promise in the NFC South, but even before the season, I didn't pick them to win a division in the NFC South anyway, so a lot of things there. All the AFC North teams lost except for the Steelers. So right now, the Steelers are number 1 in the AFC North after week 1, so I mean, of course, that's funny. But yeah, that's a really good sign and a really good game for the Steelers. If their defense, if the offense keeps following the defense, not making mistakes and things of that nature, Justin Fields plays good, I don't think you put Russell Wilson back in my opinion. That's just me. We'll see what happens, but that's definitely an encouraging win for the Steelers, a discouraging one for the Falcons. There's really hope for both teams in terms of having a solid season. Now, this was a really good game between the Texans and the Colts, and the Texans won 29-27. Me being from the Houston area, I'm not a Texans fan, but obviously this is the local game that was on, so I was able to watch this from start to finish basically, and both quarterbacks played great. Of course, CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, both drafted in the 2023 draft class. They looked amazing. First, we'll talk about CJ Stroud. Had arguably and really definitively, in my opinion, the GOAT rookie season of all quarterbacks of all time. He had a great year last year, and going into the sophomore season, really just keeping up that great energy and great play. And the Texans didn't even look their greatest, but that's a scary thing because they still looked really freaking good. CJ completed 24 out of his 32 passing attempts. He had 234 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, and we saw his weapons on full display. I mean, Nico Collins, 6 receptions, 117 receiving yards. Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs, they didn't even go too crazy, but Stephon Diggs had 2 touchdowns, only had 33 receiving yards, but that was a good sign to be able to get those 2 touchdowns for him. Tank Dell only had 40 receiving yards, but we know that 3-headed monster in the receiving core right there, they're going to continue to get better and elevate. But that's not even the thing that I want to talk about. Freaking Joe Mixon had basically 160 rushing yards on 30 carries and a touchdown against the Colts. I mean, literally bludgeoning the Colts defense. He went crazy. And I was at a Texans game like almost a month ago in the preseason because I was helping do audio. I didn't realize Joe Mixon was like freaking around 6'2" or something like that, because he's like a few inches taller than me. I was like, hold on, because you know most running backs are like under 6 foot. But yeah, Joe Mixon, I mean, he played powerful. He was really freaking efficient, and he's really a game changer for that Texans offense, because we saw last year they struggled in the running game. Devin Singletary, he did have some good moments, but Joe Mixon is obviously a wide upgrade, and that's going to be really good for the Texans because now they have the passing game unlocked and the running game too. I'm telling you, they're going to be a real threat in the AFC going forward. But also talking about the Colts, I mean, Anthony Richardson, he looked really good in himself. Had 2 50-plus yard completions, had 2 touchdowns, 212 passing yards, and also had 56 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. So he looked really balanced. Of course, he only played 4 games before being sidelined the rest of his rookie year with a shoulder injury. So that's really encouraging for Colts fans because that was a really good game, and there's a lot of things ahead. I mean, both of these teams, they'll definitely be fixtures to win the AFC South along with the Jaguars in my opinion. But Alec Pierce also had a good game for the Colts, had 3 receptions for 125 receiving yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor also had a touchdown, only had 48 rushing yards. But yeah, both of these teams, definitely a rivalry rivalry in the AFC South. Looking forward to seeing how their season unfold and develop, but I really enjoyed this game as well, and it was one of the better games for week 1. This next game was looking like it was going to be an upset, but ultimately it wasn't, as the Arizona Cardinals lost to the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills prevailed, winning 34-28. Not gonna lie, Kyler Murray, he had an electric first half, and overall the game was pretty solid for him. He completed 21 out of his 31 passing attempts. He had 162 passing yards and a touchdown, and also had 57 rushing yards. Also, James Conner had a touchdown too. That Arizona team, they definitely fight, that's for sure. Last season you saw that when they had a couple of grinded out wins at the end of the season against a team like the Eagles, and even earlier in the year like the Cowboys last year. Jonathan Gannon, he knows how to coach those players in Arizona for sure, but it wasn't enough. The Bills still ended up winning, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Bills just because they lost Stephon Diggs and had to get rid of people like Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer and some of their different defensive pieces and wide receiving pieces as well. I think this team is going to still be really good. Added in Keon Coleman. Didn't score any touchdowns, but he had 51 receiving yards. He looked good. Khalil Shakir also had a touchdown. James Cook had over 100 yards total, 71 rushing and the rest receiving. He's always a great threat out the backfield and also as a receiving option at the running back position, so that was good. But obviously we have to talk about Josh Allen. I mean, I saw that anonymous poll that players put talking about him being overrated. First of all, bro, if you're anonymous, that's a weak dog. But anyways, Josh Allen, I think that low-key he might be the second best talented quarterback overall, and you can make the argument that he's the second best quarterback. Disrespect is crazy to me. The Bills have absolutely owned the AFC East since Tom Brady left the Patriots. So, I mean, I think they're going to win a division again this year, no cap. I know the Dolphins are really good. I know the Jets, chances that they have as well with Aaron Rodgers back, but bro, I'm telling you, Buffalo is still going to be really good. Defense still there, have pieces like Ed Oliver, Von Miller, players of that nature. And talking about the stats even more about Josh Allen, I mean, he had 4 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 2 rushing. He was clean in the pocket, completed 18 out of his 23 passing attempts, at 232 passing yards, 39 rushing yards. So don't sleep on the Bills, guys. I know that they lost Diggs and all those other players, but they're still going to be really good in the AFC. I'm not saying that they're going to make the AFC Championship game or win a Super Bowl, but don't be surprised if a player like Josh Allen ended up winning MVP, because low-key he has been knocking at the door in terms of winning that award statistically for the past few years. This next game was a bit of a cluster too, not the prettiest game at all, but the Bears ended up beating the Tennessee Titans, winning 24-17, and they were down earlier in the game. Ultimately, the Titans ended up folding, and I know y'all saw the interception from freaking Will Levis in the 4th quarter. That was gross. Even he was on the ground just regretting his decision. Just take the sack, bro. That was awful. Oh my gosh, that was terrible, but that led to a pick 6, and I'm not gonna lie though, the Bears offense, it was pretty horrid. I mean, Caleb Williams only completed 14 out of his 29 passing attempts, had 93 passing yards. I think the Bears had less than 150 total yards of offense. I mean, that's disgusting for sure, but at least they got the W. At least Caleb Williams got his first win in his first start, but things are gonna get tougher because next week they play against the Houston Texans on Sunday Night Football. He's gonna play against CJ Stroud, who, like I talked about earlier, had the greatest rookie season of all time for an NFL quarterback, and that defense in Houston is really good too, from the secondary to the front 7 to the linebackers. I mean, they're gonna be ready. So if you think that Titans defense was crazy, Caleb Williams, you got something coming against the Texans, but we'll see what happens because that'll be an intriguing matchup. But for the Titans, I mean, we don't really expect too much for them anyways. I mean, they do have some talent, of course, defensively as well. They got L'Jarius Sneed and some other pieces. Offensively, Okonkwo at the tight end position, he's pretty good, but Will Levis, I mean, he has a lot of talent. I think it's just for them and Brian Callahan and really the Tennessee Titans overall to get things right. They have Tony Pollard, who had a rushing touchdown as well too, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a really competitive team, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs or anything like that. But for the Bears, they got to get things right for sure, being in the NFC North, because a lot of people view them as having potential to be a wild card team, and for sure because Caleb Williams has a lot of weapons. I mean, people like Aroma Dunze, who's a rookie with him, Keenan Allen, they just extended DJ Moore, have Cole Kmet, have DeAndre Swift, have a lot of different weapons. So I mean, there's really no excuses for at least Caleb Williams to have a really good year, respectable year, because the Bears were 7-10 last year. They only had the first pick because of that trade with Carolina, so we'll see what happens there, but definitely not a pretty good game, but a good win for the Bears, I would say. The Miami Dolphins beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 20-17. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention a little bit about Tyreek Hill getting arrested. It's really a terrible situation. I would say most law enforcement is really good, and I don't want to talk about this too long because we're talking about football here, guys, but that's bad. I mean, him being on the ground about that, I mean, and people may say that the police officer didn't know who Tyreek Hill was. Bro, you're in Miami. They know who Tyreek Hill was. Really just abusing their power. I mean, it's just gross to me that that happened, but I'm glad that Tyreek and the whole team is good, and I'm glad that the Dolphins won. That's good for their team. And at the beginning of the game, it really looked like the Jaguars had command of the game, but ultimately reality set in and the Dolphins were able to make a run off of explosive plays like Tyreek Hill having an 80-yard touchdown. I believe it was. He had 130 receiving yards and a touchdown for the game, 7 receptions. Also, Jalen Waddle went crazy. He had 5 receptions for 109 receiving yards. Tua looked really good, completed 23 out of his 37 passing attempts, having 338 passing yards and that touchdown to Tyreek Hill. And also Devon Achane had a touchdown too. The Miami Dolphins team, we know they're explosive. They have a lot of great weapons weapons. It just comes down to what they're going to do in these cold weather games and also in the playoffs, because they're really good. But like I said, I still think that Buffalo's going to win the division. I could be wrong, obviously. I could be wrong about both, and the Jets winning or the Dolphins still winning. But the Dolphins, they definitely have a lot of talent. They should be in the playoffs this year. We'll see what happens after week 1. But for the Jaguars, this is a team that really fell off after starting the year 8-3 last year and ending up having a colossal downfall. Trevor Lawrence also was injured last year too, so that played a part in it for sure as well. But he looked pretty sharp too, I would say. I mean, obviously they were up and they blew a lead, so that's unfortunate. They did lose at the end of the game as the Dolphins made that game-winning field goal. But Trevor wasn't bad at all by any means. He completed 12 out of his 21 passing attempts for 1 touchdown. ETN also had a touchdown. Their rookie Brian Thomas Jr. had a touchdown as well too, and also Gabe Davis had 62 receiving yards. So both of these teams, they'll definitely be fixtures in the AFC. We'll see who ends up winning the division, because really both of these teams have tough divisions in the AFC East and the AFC South. The Seattle Seahawks beat the Denver Broncos, winning 26-20. And I would definitely say this was a tough start for Bo Nix to go into for his first game as an NFL quarterback, playing against that defense headlined by head coach Mike McDonald, who was a defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens last year and is now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. But that's a tough game for him, but he didn't play the best. He didn't play awful like a Bryce Young or Daniel Jones, any players like that, because he also had a rushing touchdown, but he didn't play the greatest, and there's definitely some things to improve on. I'm sure Sean Payton will be hard on him, because y'all know how he is for sure. Bo Nix threw 2 interceptions and only had 138 passing yards. Like I did mention, though, he had 35 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, so that's solid. He was able to show some of his mobility, but still a lot of ways to go there. For the Seahawks though, Geno Smith had a really solid performance, I would say. Had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, completing 18 out of his 25 passing attempts for 171 passing yards. Solid game from him for sure. I love how Geno has been able to progress from being a backup to now in his 3rd year as a starter, playing pretty good football. So that's a good shout out to him. Lockett had 77 receiving yards, but Kenneth Walker, he had a really good game. Had 20 carries on the 103 rushing yards and a touchdown. Shout out to him. I think Kenneth Walker is really one of the most underrated running backs in the league, in my opinion, because I usually always pick him up for one of my fantasy teams, and I have him this year. So it's a good thing for him. Seattle, they'll definitely be a competitive team, and they'll try to fight for a wild card spot in the NFC this year. The Los Angeles Chargers won a pretty good divisional game against the Las Vegas Raiders, beating the Raiders 22-10. A good game for the Chargers. They definitely have a new identity now under new head coach Jim Harbaugh from Michigan, and also, of course, coached with the 49ers around a decade ago, leading them to the Super Bowl. Have a different philosophy than what Justin Herbert is accustomed to, because he only had 144 passing yards, but played a pretty efficient game, completing 17 out of his 26 passing attempts. But that running game for the Chargers was very prevalent. J.K. Dobbins went off. He had 10 carries for 135 rushing yards and a touchdown. That's a really good performance out of him, and really pointing into the identity of the running game for Jim Harbaugh, and we see that in Baltimore as well with John Harbaugh. So that's really good for the Chargers. A lot of people don't expect a lot from them this season because of their lack of weapons, but their weapons played pretty good. I mean, even rookie Lat McConkey had a pretty solid game. He had a touchdown, only 39 receiving yards, but had a touchdown, so that's a good thing. But there's definitely some promise for the Chargers for the future. I think that they'll be competitive this year, of course, being under Harbaugh, because he prides himself on having tough teams. I don't expect too much for them, but definitely they'll be solid, better than what they were last year for sure, because they also drafted Joe Alt, who in my opinion was the best offensive lineman from this draft, just really honing into that physical type of game. But also for the Raiders on the flip side, Gardner Minshew, I mean, he had a pretty good game. He completed 25 out of his 33 passing attempts, 257 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He spread the ball out pretty decently, I would say. Jacoby Myers had 61 receiving yards. Devontae Adams only had 57 receiving yards. I don't know. It just seemed like things were stagnant at some points of the game. I honestly expected the Raiders to win this game, because I'm not going to lie, with them getting Christian Wilkins and also still having Max Crosby, that'll definitely be intimidating for some opposing offenses. But the Chargers, they weren't fazed. They ran right into that defense and they were able to win. So that's a good win for the Chargers. This matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns was really an absolute bludgeoning. The Cowboys won 33-17, but it really wasn't even that close. I mean, the Cowboys were up 28-3 at one point in the game. They just out-schemed, out-coached, out-played, out-physical, really outdid everything compared to the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson looked perplexed. Just a lot of questions about him after this game for sure. And obviously, I would cut him a little slack, because both the right tackle and the left tackle that are starters for the Cleveland Browns, they were both out in the game. But regardless, that's not to slight the Dallas Cowboys defense at all. In my opinion though, a lot of people are discrediting the Cowboys defense and really just blaming everything on Deshaun Watson. This Cowboys defense, they looked even better. Defensively, they were stopping the run under new defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer. That's what they had a lot of trouble with the past few years, stopping the run, and they added linebackers like Eric Kendricks. DeMarvion Overshown is back. Micah Parsons played great, of course. Who is surprised by that? One of the top players, period, in the league. DeMarcus Lawrence still there. That team played really good defensively. I mean, they had Deshaun Watson scared. I mean, there's really no other way to say it. I mean, he wasn't confident at all in the game. It really does suck for Deshaun Deshaun. And a lot of people aren't going to agree with that because, you know, all the off-field stuff. A lot of people, their opinions about him and all the stuff that happened. And a contract for sure, too. I mean, it's bad. It's not looking good at all. It's not. It really isn't. They have weapons offensively. You have Amari Cooper. You have Jerry Jeudy. Eventually, you have Nick Chubb coming back. You have Jerome Ford, who played solid last year. It just looked bad. It looked very, very bad. And you have a championship level defense, but your defense can only do too much if your offense isn't supporting you. So Cleveland definitely has to get to the drawing board, but really focusing on Dallas this game though. Of course, Dak Prescott finally got his money, signed a 4-year, $260 million contract extension, being the highest paid player in NFL history now. That's good for the Cowboys in terms of answering the question if you want to continue with Dak. That answer is obviously yes. And the Cowboys look great. Obviously, they look great in the regular season, but it's always going to come down to the postseason for them. And I tried to hide it for a while now. I'm not going to lie though, guys. I am a Cowboys fan, but I'm definitely not delusional and I'm unbiased, so I mean that's how it is. But for me, even as a fan, it comes down to the postseason. I mean, yes, they look great, and obviously as a fan you would overreact and be excited about a lot of things, but they got to put it together when it matters most, and they definitely have the talent to do so. A lot of people had their question marks because of the rookie offensive lineman Cooper Beebe, Tyler Guyton started. They played a pretty solid game even against Myles Garrett. In that pass rush, they really played away for him, so he really couldn't wreck the game. So that was a good thing for the Cowboys, but we'll see how things go. I mean, CD was back, he played good. Dak played a solid game, didn't have to do too much. I mean, completed 19 out of his 32 passing attempts, had 179 passing yards, had a touchdown. Zeke Elliott had a touchdown. He looked solid. CeeDee Lamb had around 80 total yards of offense between receiving, obviously, for 60 plus, and also 25 rushing wise off of those little jet sweep plays. But he looked good. Brandon Cooks had a touchdown as well too. That defense though, like I talked about, they're really freaking good. I'm excited about that as a Cowboys fan, and just in general, they look really great. Eric Kendricks had an interception. Trevon Diggs is back, had an interception. Even rookie Caitlin Carson looked pretty good in the absence of Deron Bland. He'll be back eventually though. So Cowboys, they look good, but the postseason is where we'll judge them the most. Speaking of favorite teams, my dad's favorite team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, won pretty decisively against the Washington Commanders, winning 37-20. Baker Mayfield had a really good game. I'm really happy for his success, not only getting that new contract. I saw how he played last season and having the rapport that he has with Mike Evans, who had 2 touchdowns himself. The rapport that he has with Chris Godwin, who had 83 receiving yards and also a touchdown. I mean, Baker, he played really good. He threw for 4 touchdowns, had 189 passing yards, completing 24, had his 30 passing attempts. I mean, a really efficient game. And this is against a team in the Commanders that I thought was really improved. They could be, I mean, it is the first game of the season, but especially defensively, they've added people like Bobby Wagner. They added some pieces from the Cowboys with, of course, Dan Quinn being the new head coach in Washington, so he brought some of his players over there, but it clearly seems like they have a gap to fill. I mean, Jaden Daniels, he did have 272 yards in total, having 88 rushing yards and 184 passing yards, completing 17 out of his 24 passing attempts, but this team does have a lot of ways to go for sure. I mean, Brian Robinson Jr. had a touchdown, but they still have some learning to do. But this Buccaneers team, I talked about the Falcons earlier in the NFC South, saying that I don't think they'll win the division. This is why. The Buccaneers, they still have a really freaking good defense. They still have a lot of weapons offensively. This team is really good, guys. Before we talk about Monday Night Football, we have to talk about Sunday Night Football, where the Detroit Lions beat the Los Angeles Rams 26-20 in overtime. A rematch of that wild card game from last season in Detroit. And it was a really good game, I would say, for sure. I mean, Matthew Stafford played a pretty good game. Besides that one interception that he threw in the end zone, he completed 34 out of his 49 passing attempts. He threw for 317 yards and had a touchdown as well. And really, the Rams in the fourth quarter, they were in position to win for sure, but they weren't able to execute, and that ended up putting the Lions in position to tie the game. And then when the Lions got the ball in overtime, they bludgeoned the Rams defense. I believe they ran 7 out of their 8 plays. They were all rushing plays, and David Montgomery went off, and they really sent a message. He had a touchdown as well, had 91 rushing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs also had a touchdown as well in the game. And Jamison Williams, I think that's the biggest story for the Lions offensively in this game against the Rams. He had 5 receptions for 121 receiving yards and a touchdown. If he can keep getting off like that, that's gonna be a huge danger for teams playing against the Lions, because you already have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He didn't have a crazy good game, neither did tight end Sam Laporta, but those 3 being Jared Goff's 3 key weapons, at least from a wide receiver standpoint, or as a tight end standpoint, that'll be nice for them for sure. And they'll definitely be at the top of the NFC. No question about that. Jared Goff had a pretty solid game, I would say too. Completing 18 out of his 28 passing attempts, threw for 217 yards, had a touchdown and interception. I mean, that's a pretty good game from the Lions. I mean, I'm glad that was a good cap to the Sunday Night Football games for sure. The final week 1 game that took place was Monday Night Football, a matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Jets, and the 49ers won easily, winning 32-19. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, CMC, did not play in the game. I know a lot of fantasy managers are probably mad about that, because I know he was probably a lot of #1 picks in a lot of different leagues. But if someone picked up Jordan Mason, which why would you? No one expected him to do this. He played crazy. And I talked about a second ago, the Detroit Lions bludgeoning the Rams on Sunday Night Football. Well, the 49ers run game absolutely killed the Jets defense. Jordan Mason, undrafted free agent, no one expected anything out of him, of course, especially as a backup. He had 28 carries on 147 yards, basically rounded up to 150, had a touchdown, played really good and effective, and they were just killing that Jets defense, who everyone talked about being one of the best in the league, and I believe they still are. But that 49ers team is on a new level. A lot of people are saying teams like the Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in NFC. Nah, I still think it's the 49ers. I firmly believe that. I still think they're the second best team in the league. I mean, and without Christian McCaffrey, they did this. Now they're definitely going to incorporate Jordan Mason more after seeing this performance. That team is still putting people on notice. Brought back Ayuk, brought back Trent Williams, and also potentially when Ricky Pearsall, when he plays again, thank God that he's okay from that gunshot wound. I think that's another weapon for this offense potentially later in the season down the line. And for the Jets, I still think they have a lot of potential. I think that they'll be a wild card in the AFC. And we know how loaded the AFC is. It was great to see Aaron Rodgers finally play a full game, the first full game that he played since January 2023, because of course, he only played 4 snaps in the game on the Jets last year before tearing his Achilles. He had 167 passing yards, completed 13 out of his 21 passing attempts, and had a touchdown and an interception. Breece Hall had an okay game. He had a touchdown, only rushed for 54 yards. That San Francisco defense, just crazy. Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. They also brought in Leonard Floyd. Just a lot of weapons on that defense. So I'm not surprised that the 49ers won. I really expected it. My prediction score before the game was 31-21, and they won 32-19, so that's close. Yeah, a good game. I think both of these teams are going to be well off this year, especially the 49ers. I mean, they're continuing to knock on the door. Are they going to kick it in and potentially win a Super Bowl with this core? We will see, but it was a good win for them, and I think the Jets will still be straight afterwards as well. So a lot of different things to take away from this NFL Week 1. It is the #1 overreaction week for sure, and in my opinion, you really can't judge these teams until like Week 7, Week 8 probably, because guys, stuff changes so fast. Teams that start off like say for 3-4, they can end up going on a winning streak and end the season 10-7. I mean, it just fluctuates so much in the NFL, so you really have to reserve your judgments. I'm just glad football is back, guys. I mean, it's a beautiful time for sure. Thursday night football in a couple of days between the Dolphins and the Bills. It's gonna be a really good game, man. Just a lot to take away from it. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below about NFL Week 1. I appreciate you guys watching always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, real things of that nature. Every Tuesday, Lord willing, of course. Gonna be having these recaps coming, so y'all stay tuned for this whole 2024 season. It's a beautiful time to be alive. Y'all be blessed. Know that you matter, you have purpose, and God loves you. Y'all have a good one.